welcome everybody and say what a real thrill it is to have this time to share these results with everybody and to hear from everybody as well about the thoughts you have, the ideas you have in this space. This is very exciting time, I think, in the sense that we're seeing tremendous interest in new areas for financial inclusion through mobile money, through innovative savings products. And we're starting to see a lot of really rigorous research come out that can guide us towards what types of ideas are working better than others. Because as we know, it's really easy to make things sound good, but it's not as easy to always know what's really working. And that's the heart of what this is all about, is separating out the things that simply sound good, that can, that someone can kind of be dynamic and exciting and put it together and rally people to do something versus something that actually has evidence behind it. And that's the heart of what all of this work is about. And so it's exciting to share all of this with you and to get ideas from all of you about where there's still massive voids, because we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of this evidence that we're sharing with all of you. So we want to hear from everybody about other ideas and areas where there's weaknesses in knowledge, so that we can push forward in filling in those gaps. So we really look forward not just to presenting and sharing these results with everyone, but hearing from everybody as well about what they're working on and how further evidence can help guide what you're doing. There we go. I did it. 30 seconds. And not quite.
35 seconds.
35 seconds. So I'm going to do three things. The two is I'm going to present two different studies, share two different studies with you from Uganda on youth savings and youth financial education. Before I do that, I want to just because this is the first talk, I'm going to take the luxury of hopefully doing something which can help illuminate why all of these studies are being set up the way they're being set up in terms of being able to show you what the impact of something is. So I'm going to take a few minutes first to explain what an impact evaluation is and why we do all of this. And that part of that talk, I think, I hope you will see will apply to everything that lots of other people are presenting as well. So I'm going to just kind of give a few minutes on that. So when we ask about what the impact of something is, there's two types of questions that we often will put this in. First is just the first order question about, there's a very basic goal that we have. If it's in the case of education, for instance, did remedial education tutoring improve school attendance, if that was the goal? And that's a kind of a first stage of a lot of the way analysis and a lot of the questions we ask. And of course, underneath that are then deeper questions that we always want to know about who we helped more than not. Because if you're running a program that, for instance, is providing, go to the context of the space, financial education to lots of people, but it turns out that you're only really helping a subset, maybe a third of the people. Well, you can save 2/3 of your money and just focus on the ones who you're actually helping with your program. Right? And so figuring out more about who you're actually helping the most can help you direct your resources that way, and also can help you further figure out how to innovate for the ones you're not helping, figure out why you're not helping them, and figure out how to improve that part of the program. When we talk about what impact is, this is where there's an issue that is very important in terms of establishing not just change over time, but what the program actually caused to happen. And that's a key difference that you're seeing with all of the studies that you're going to hear today. None of these studies are just following people over time. So let me just show you some examples of the perils of following people over time. Suppose that we have some program and it's trying to reduce school dropout. So that our goal here is to get this line to go down. And so the line is over time, and there's an intervention, and the line goes down. And from that, we would think, okay, we did a good job. But what we really want to know is what would have happened had this program not existed. That's the counterfactual. So in this situation, the program did do a good thing. The yellow line went down. The counterfactual is what would have happened, this kind of hypothetical. And this is good, dropouts fell. But imagine a slightly different story. Imagine here, dropouts go slightly up over time. If that's where we stopped our analysis, we would go, gee shucks, we didn't do a very good job here. But in fact, the counterfactual in this world went even worse. Something was going on in the world that made it so the dropouts were going up and up. And this program, whatever it is, doesn't matter, actually helped to mitigate that problem. And so this is a good thing, even though the before-after would have said, hey, you didn't do anything. So the point is, we really want to know, when we ask what the impact of a program is, we're really asking the following question. What happened with the program and what would have happened without the program? And we're comparing those two things. That's the critical part. Is that second part is the counterfactual. So everything you're hearing today and tomorrow are randomized control trials. So this is exactly the same approach that is used, for instance, with the pharmaceutical industry to understand the impact of a new medicine to cure a disease or alleviate some symptom from a disease. And that's exactly the approach that we're taking here in trying to understand the impact of different social services. And so the random assignment is a way of simply allowing there to be a observably and unobservably equal group, as long as your sample size is large enough, of people who have access to a program and people who do not. And almost always what we're doing is we're using and embracing the natural resource constraints of an organization. There's a program, they're going to go to 100 schools, that's not changing, we're not holding back the program we're not making it so they go to fewer schools. We're just working with them to construct a list of 200 schools, and then we're going to provide financial education in 100 and not in 100. And that's just an example of the type of setup. What this is all getting at is to try to get at a cost-effective analysis. So suppose you were in a store and you saw 2 bags of coffee, one big, one small, both cost $10. Which would you buy? It's pretty straightforward. You buy the big bag. Right? That's very intuitive. You're looking at me like, what, am I, an idiot? Right? But this isn't so easy. This is easy when we're buying coffee, and we're looking at the same exact product, big bag, small bag, same price. We get that. But it's not so easy when we're a donor trying to choose between programs, or even when we're a program and we're just there with our budget and we're trying to spend it. And at the end of the day, though, it's the same type of calculation. We're saying, okay, I got $10,000 for my program, or if I'm a big donor, I have $1 million, and I want to buy something. Suppose that I want to buy, more school attendance. That's my goal. I want to buy more school attendance. Well, I have $5,000. What should I do? Pay for school uniforms for children so they can go to school, or pay for deworming pills so that they're healthier, so that they're not staying at home because they're not feeling well. Right? It's the same problem as which coffee bag to buy, it's just that it's not so clear. And this is the whole point of this type of research, is to try to get answers to these questions so that donors can make the right choice, government can make the right choices, and also organizations, because organizations do have choices, right? It's not all driven by what the donor said. There are choices where you have a budget, and then you have to decide what's the best way to run this program. And ultimately you have to choose. The answer, by the way, here, if your goal is to increase school attendance, and there are worms problems in the schools, is that deworming is far more effective for increasing school attendance for dollars spent. Okay, so that's my broad introduction to why we're doing what we're doing and how we do it. So the first question is very straightforward, which is we want to improve attitudes, knowledge, behavior, savings behavior, and in one in particular, we're very focused on school outcomes. It's specifically a school savings program. So we're very specific to try to increase expenditure on school expenses, and in order to then examine whether that can lead to improved educational outcomes. So some of the bottleneck for education coming because of not having the fees, the money for the various fees and expenses necessary. The second question which I want to put forward is from a different study in which we're asking something similar to that coffee bag question. We have 2 different ways of trying to engage the youth in better savings behavior. And 2 different mantras out there. One just says, it's just about access. We just need to give them better bank accounts that have lower fees, lower hurdles to getting into the bank accounts. And people understand what a savings account is based at a fundamental level. Just give them access. Another says, no, you need to teach financial education. That you need to teach these skills, teach these values, teach these attitudes. And with that, there's many different ways for them to save. So don't worry about that part. Just you put these values and these principles need to be taught. And then, of course, there's a third story which says, no, these are both problems. You have to do both together. And you won't see any impact if you don't do the 2 together because they're both problems. And so in the second study we have, we're testing that idea. So that's this study here. It's the relative impacts of 2 programs, a financial education and a group savings. It was conducted with the Church of Uganda youth group, so children between 16 to 28, so the older side of youth. It was done from May 2010 to August 2011. This is co-authored with Julian Jameson and Jonathan Zinman. The second study is what we refer to as Super Savers. This is the one that was done with PEDN. I always forget whether I'm supposed to say PEDN. I always feel I'm supposed to spell out the acronym. And here, this is a study which is very similar to some other work that you're going to hear about from other parts of Africa about commitment savings. And here we posed as kind of a two-pronged question. First of all is, can getting access to a savings account in school, can that help children then spend more money and save up money that they need to pay for the school fees and pay for the supplies and things of this nature? But a second question we wanted to find out was, if we make this a commitment account where the money is locked into spending on educational expenses, will it work even better by giving them that commitment that ties their hands and makes it so that the money must be spent in that way? The alternative being a slightly looser commitment where we simply say the money is supposed to be used for these things, but we don't actually make them use it for that purpose. And so this is just a chart to show you a little bit of the overlap of the two studies. SALSA is the first study with the financial education and accounts, where we study the impact of getting access to a savings account, nothing more, the financial education, nothing more, and then the savings account and financial education. And all three of those are compared to a control group. In the second study, we have that middle row, savings account and financial education, but we then also have these two variations on the savings account compared to a control. So that's how these two fit together. And the super savers are younger children done through schools. So here are the results. And this is just the sky-high version of the results. So in terms of savings behavior, we had a lot of self-reported behavior. We also have the administrative data on the super savers on the school base, because we know from the bank exactly what they put in the bank account. We're also very interested in some of the process outcomes, particularly on the super savers, because we want to understand how much of the changes occurred, for instance, because of parental involvement and things of this nature, or perhaps because of increased school attendance and things like that. So here's the first result from the financial literacy. This is the literacy that was put together by Freedom from Hunger. And when we just look at the impact on financial knowledge, so I think of that as we gave them lessons and then they take a test. Think of it that nature. Although it's a far enough delayed from the actual taking of the learning the material that there's time to kind of forget. And the material had a big impact on knowledge. So both the financial education and an accounts on the left, the first column and the third column are the two that have the financial education. And as you can see, there was a big increase in knowledge, basically how they did on the test that asked the basic questions about financial education. So that was a nice success, but at the same time, to be perfectly blunt, it's nice to see that this goes up. If it didn't go up, that would disturb me. But if it does go up, you should not be satisfied, right? Because what we really care about is actually changing behavior. So we also looked at, this is on the Super Saver study on savings attitudes, where we do not see any changes. So attitudes is a very hard thing, first of all, to measure, to be clear. Asking people their overall opinion on how important savings are, and these are very qualitative type things to ask. And so it's not, I don't want to put too much weight on this, but we don't see a big change on savings attitudes. Savings behavior is the key. So on the left we have this Super Saver study, on the right we have SALSA. So on the Super Saver study, we see that when we give them the cash account, not the voucher account. So the cash account is the loosey-goosey one in which they are not committed to spending the money on the school expenses. It's simply kind of nudged, so to speak. And when we do that, along with this parental involvement campaign, where we got parents involved and explained to them what was happening in more depth, we see a huge increase in the amount that the students saved. We do not see that increase when we tie their hands too tightly. So they didn't want the super tight commitment contract that locked them into spending on those expenses. And both of those are compared to the control. On the financial education study, here what we observe is we do observe an increase in savings behavior from financial education alone. Now that tells us that they have access to some savings vehicles even without getting access to this account, that there are things in their life that they have access to. We do also see an increase in the account. It's not as strong statistically, depending on depending on what specification and how we do the statistics. The result kind of comes and goes is the best way to think about it. So it's somewhere in between. So it's a somewhat positive result also just from getting access to the account. What's striking with this for the financial education is that these are youth these are 18 to 26-year-olds, remember, so they're not that young, right? The 18 to 26, they have some income-generating activity going on in their life, and savings is being used to actually help further some sort of income-generating activity. So here we see across the board in all three of the treatment groups an increase in actual income from getting access to the savings or the financial education, which is leading to savings accounts. Then last, I want to share with you the education outcomes. So these are the results that I think are in some ways the most exciting, because whenever we see, let's remember that finance is not an end game. Finance is a means to an end. And so when we can see finance being used to promote particular things in other domains that are really important, like education and health, then that's an exciting moment when you can see that the finance is that kind of catalyst to other change. And so here what we see is that the cash with the parental involvement on the very left, that we see school supplies go up, because that's what they were using the money for mostly. And we also see test scores go up, and that as a percent, that's an 8 percentage point increase, an 8% increase in test scores, which is a very large increase in test scores to generate just from giving someone access to a savings account that's a school-based savings account. We do not see that increase from the other treatments that did not generate. So we needed both the hands to not be super tied, and we also had to get the parents involved. If we didn't get the parents involved, the kids did not end up using the money on the school supplies and increase their education. So it was the two together that worked in order to increase educational outcomes. So there's one main takeaway that I have from this, and also from the study you're about to hear from Jim Barry, which, to be honest with you, was a very pleasant surprise from my perspective. Because there's a lot of adult financial education programs that we've seen evaluated, and very rare to see positive impacts, to be perfectly blunt. So a lot of the adult financial education studies that we've seen have been fairly disappointing in terms of finding positive impact. Sometimes you find some impact on education or opening a bank account, but not actually using it, and no big increase in savings and no big transformations. And so it is fairly exciting to see that on these youth studies we're able to see these noticeable changes, and I include in that what you're about to hear from Jim Barry. So we do have, I think it's really important to see these impacts that go beyond the financial education, the financial impacts as well. Because whenever we want to talk about finance, we want to see some of these intermediary changes happen. We want to see savings accounts go up. Asset building is a good thing. But it's also really important for us to think, when we think about it from a policy perspective, how this is actually changing people's lives in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of enterprise, in terms of self-esteem, in terms of even things on the mental health side about happiness and how in control they feel in terms of their own life. And these are really important ultimate outcomes that are the ones of most interest. So one thing I want to say is now as a note of caution. These are fairly short-term results. These are results from about 1 year after the intervention. Right? As with most things in life, we tend to think there might be some decay, although there's certainly logic to think that in some things there's the opposite of decay, that things can snowball and get bigger and better and better. We just don't know. And so whenever there are results that are exciting of this nature, we always want to do longer term follow-up. So we are hoping on these studies and encourage others in similar vein to do a longer term follow-up whenever there is good, successful short-term results. And also longer-term follow-up, even if short-term results are bad, if there's a good logical reason why the results will simply take more time to accumulate. That's not, I think in a case like financial education, that's a harder one to believe. If you don't see results in the short run, it's hard to believe that they're going to then all of a sudden magically appear in the long run. But we are pursuing long-term studies on both of these in order to understand Well, we've increased test scores by 8%. What does that mean the following year? Did they continue saving, and will the increase in test scores lead to further educational outcomes in future years? So with that, I will close and just say thank you once again to everyone for participating in this conference, for coming, for engaging with us. For those of you who were here for the workshop these past few days, for being a part of that process, and we look forward to hearing from all of you during question and answer periods, during breakout sessions, and in years to come. So thank you very much.